Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled Neighbors Dumped Horse Manure on Their Front Lawn. To put it plain and simple, our next door neighbor is a complete and total nightmare. Before I get into the good stuff, let me just tell you a little bit about what led up to this insane situation. I've been neighbors with this guy for about 20 years and every single day has been a nightmare. This is the kind of neighbor that will start a fight with you over the smallest thing because he enjoys conflict. Some of the things he has complained to me about is that my trash is blocking the fire hydrant. It wasn't. There were lights on in my house at a time that he considered to be too late at night. He even complained that there were leaves on my lawn during autumn, when literally everyone had leaves on their lawn, including him. He also ended up building a fence that was on my land just to have a fight about it and waste months of my time having it be put on his side. Any one of these things could make a small story by itself, but I think nothing will top the craziest thing that this guy did. One morning, I woke up to the sounds of a dump truck outside. I honestly didn't think anything of it until a horrible smell came through my window. I finally looked outside to see that he had dumped a ton of horse manure on his front lawn. More specifically, the part of his lawn where the property line was, albeit it was completely on his side. The smell sure was not though, and I was getting ready for another round of fights with this guy. All pleasantries were gone years ago with this guy, so I was cutting straight to the point. Me, what the hell is going on out here? Neighbor, I'm just getting some fertilizer delivered. He had a sneer that he loved to wear on his face when he knew that he was riling me up. I couldn't help the anger though. This has to be a ton of manure. You don't even have enough land for it. You're just piling it up on the lawn. Neighbor, it's on my property, so you should just go back inside and not worry about it. The other trucks should be gone soon. Other trucks? I asked. Neighbor, of course, I need more than just this. It's the finest horse manure that money can buy. And if I catch you stealing any of it, then we are going to have a big problem between you and me. Me? I have a problem now. The smell is revolting. You cannot just leave it out here on the yard. Neighbor, I can do what I want on my property. This is perfectly legal manure, so you better get out of here before I call the cops on you for trespassing. So I went back inside to my wife and started fuming while explaining what this jerk was doing. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the window while I watched 2 more trucks come and dump manure into his yard, almost creating a line between our 2 houses. There wasn't a fence because after I had the other one removed, he never rebuilt. I have no idea if this was his idea of revenge, but I was not happy about it and was not just going to sit there and let something like that happen. I called every number that I could find that seemed relevant for something like this: the town, the sanitation department, even the mayor's office. It turns out that the law did state that horse manure was valid to use as a fertilizer on their property. Unfortunately, there was nothing in the local law about how much you could have or even the amount per area of land. Probably because nobody before this was even crazy enough to think about pulling a stunt like this. At the end though, I was basically told there was nothing I could do since it was on his property and was not technically causing a biohazard or anything. It was still that morning and I already felt exhausted from trying to figure out how to fight him on this one. One thing I knew for sure was that he was being vindictive because there was no way the smell was not bothering him just as badly. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of being next to a giant pile of manure, but in case you haven't had that unlucky pleasure, I will explain it to you. The smell was so bad that the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and we had constant food cooking in the oven just to try and fill the house with some other kind of smell. Still, even with the doors and windows shut tight, the smell seemed to seep into our home. We couldn't have guests over anymore and we started to feel extremely isolated in our own neighborhood. Our son just had a baby and couldn't bring her to visit because of how bad the smell was. You might think one would get accustomed and used to it, but nope. It just seemed to get worse the longer it sat there, and the neighbor was not even using it on his lawn. We were fed up and still looking for things that we could do to have him get rid of it. We called a couple different lawyers who all told us that even on a higher level, there was nothing illegal he was doing that we could sue for. It really felt like we were living inside of a trash can or a dump. Even everything we owned seemed to pick up the smell, so even if clothing came right out of the laundry and we came right out of the shower, we carried the scent. People at the stores would avoid us, and our friends understandably were making excuses to avoid us. I would have done the same thing in their positions, honestly. I wouldn't wish this scent on anybody. Well, except maybe for the neighbor. So I know that you are waiting for a big revenge of what we did to finally get back at the neighbor, but in the end though, he actually ended up dying and the property being sold. We never found out exactly what he died from, but it's probably a good idea to mention that he was not the youngest man in the world anymore. He could have died of old age or something else. My guess was that he knew he was dying, and this manure was one last FU to us before he moved on to the afterlife. So you might be asking what happened to the manure pile. Without anyone living there, the land became the problem of the town, and obviously they were not going to be able to resell the property in that state. So the trucks were brought in and the pile was finally removed. Hilariously and ironically enough, the grass that was under the pile was all dead and seemed starved. The smell hung around a bit longer before finally fading, and our lives and sense of smell could return to normal. And I gotta say, Ripe Stars, I am absolutely speechless after this story, and I'm also really curious in what kind of country this story happened. Because you would think in a civilized country, someone like a neighbor cannot just dump horse manure on their lawn and just get away with it. Not even in a country like Thailand you can get away with this, because the neighbors would probably tear you a new one. Either way, if you have watched until here and enjoy the stories about absolutely crazy neighbors, then please feel free to post some star emojis in the comments and maybe even like the video if you want to go the extra mile and support my channel. Thank you so much in advance, your support is very much appreciated. The next one is titled, I'm allowed on the property, you are not. This happened just this last week and is the only time that I've ever had the police called on me. So, my parents live in an absolutely amazing house with a large amount of lakefront. The neighbors' homes are not nearly as nice, but in general, it is a very wealthy neighborhood. My brother lives with my parents and they all drive nice new vehicles. My mom drives a Porsche Cayenne, my dad has a Subaru Ascent, and my brother has a Toyota Tacoma and a BMW M3. I drive a 2001 Honda Civic which has several dents and scratches. It looks incredibly out of place in the neighborhood and especially so at my parents' place. So I stopped by in the middle of the day to grab some stuff from my parents' place. We are in the process of selling our home and are storing a bunch of stuff in their garage. So I was rummaging around in the garage, looking through the bins until I found what I was looking for. My GameCube controller and USB adapter, and I loaded up my car and got ready to leave. By the way guys, please post in the comments if you also had a GameCube in the past. That was definitely one of my favorite consoles of all time, and I probably cannot count on one hand anymore how many times I have finished Resident Evil 4. Anyway, when I looked out, I saw that the gate was completely blocked by a truck and a car that I did not recognize. So I hopped back out of the car and approached, and I was told by the older woman and the younger man that the cops had been called. I asked why and was told that I was caught in the act of burglary. I tried to explain that this was my parents' place and that I was just grabbing some of my stuff, but they said that they have seen my parents' kid and know what he drives. So I went back to my car and called my dad and told him that I needed him to come to his place because his neighbors think that I was breaking in. So he was on his way. It took maybe 15 minutes for the cops to show up and they beat my dad by a couple of minutes. I had no issues explaining what was going on and they were definitely on my side. My dad showing up cleared the rest of it up. The cops said that I could press charges for false imprisonment and asked my dad if he wanted to press charges for trespassing, but we chose not to because of the headaches that would clearly cause for my parents. They already had several run-ins with the neighbors, with them using equipment without permission, which is why they had been told not to return to the property by police in the past. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, on the one hand, I can definitely understand why you would not want to press charges if you have a crazy neighbor, because these people just fear that the crazy neighbor would get even crazier. However, that also kind of sends a signal to the neighbor saying that, hey, you can pretty much do whatever you want with these people and there will be no repercussions. If you would be in OP's shoes, what would you have done? Would you have pressed charges for trespassing at least? Please let us know in the comments. And the next one is titled Snow Shoveling Dramas. I am reminded of a story that happened while I was living at home. You may enjoy it. On mobile, and names have been forgotten, so I'm gonna make them up. This happened in the late 90s, early 2000s for reference. My dad owned a snowblower. During the wicked weather this side of the Rockies, he would use his blower to take care of the sidewalks in front of everyone on both sides of our block. Most of the families on my block were either seniors, those with small families, or younger couples that inherited their dead relatives' home. Everyone knew everyone, and they understood that my dad was doing this as a courtesy. He was in his 50s and just trying to be a good neighbor. So, my neighbors 2 doors down divorce and sell their house to a family from out of state. Fake name and time, the Picards sounds good. I know they were from a snowy state, but I don't remember where. They moved in during the late summer, close to the start of the school year. A couple months later, our state had a massive snowstorm. It would snow for nearly 24 hours for almost the entire winter. You would shovel and clear snow just to get another dump, and you would have to keep going and keep going. We had something like 350% of the average snowfall that month alone. So my dad is out there during the first big dump with his snowblower, just taking care of business as he is nice, and the third house down had an occupant that walked on arm crutches. He just made a path from our house to theirs. No big deal, been taking care of this for a while now. He gets done and heads to work. He gets home late most nights, so he is not expecting anyone be at the door as he walks in. But lo and behold, the Picards must have been watching out the window for him as they walk up on him as he opens the door. "Hey, did you shovel our walk?" "Huh? Our walk, the one that runs in front of our house." "Oh yeah, I did your sidewalk." "Well, we are not paying you for the shoddy work you did. You sprayed our tree with snow." My dad is out of it after a 10+ hour day, commute not included, so he is not getting what's happening. I'm sorry? "You should be. That tree is too small to handle that much snow blown on it. You need to blow it somewhere else." As my dad was one that religiously read city bylaws, he knew the time frame for removing snow and where you could put shoveled snow. The city doesn't allow you to blow snow into the street because it messes with the plow's ability to take care of the streets. But Mr. Picard insisted that he had to blow the snow elsewhere. Knowing what he knew, my dad directed the snow into the only other spot available, which was his driveway. A driveway that is almost 45 degrees down from the carport too. Or so it seemed. Wicked steep either way. So the next day, the neighbor comes by to complain again. He didn't know that a small snowfall can get cars stuck in that driveway, let alone what we had plus a snow blower. His car got stuck halfway in the street and he had to get it towed out. If my dad was home, he could have saved them the tow fee, but Picard did not know that. So Picard is fuming and saying he's going to do his own walk from now on. My dad tries to tell him that he is just assisting the neighbor on the other side and he doesn't charge for being a good neighbor, etc. It is cold and my dad wants the door shut, but Picard doesn't want to step in and my dad doesn't have his shoes or coat. So Picard just says, "I know what I'm doing. I'm a grown man. I can deal with a little fluff." The next day, my dad knocks on the neighbor's door and tries to tell Picard about how strict the city is about snow removal and how he has 24 hours from the start of snowfall to get things removed, etc. He wrote down a website where he can go to read the rules, but Picard did not take it. The city was constantly driving down our block for reasons I won't get into here. The Picards were doing a semi-sufficient job manually shoveling snow away properly, but then October in my state has a big teachers conference and most families go out of town for a late camping or early hunting trip. So did the Picards. They are gone for 4 days during the worst storm of the season. They had not arranged to have the walk shoveled and the snow was piling so high, city inspectors came out. Parents and neighbors complained to the city that they couldn't walk down our street. It was obvious that the walks were being taken care of, so why not theirs? The city posted a 48-hour compliance notice, but it would be 72 before the Picards got back home. The city charged them with hazardous conditions and failure to maintain property accessible to the public. On top of the labor fee to shovel the walk, it was like $350 easily. The city kept a watchful eye on the property for the rest of the winter for any issues from then on out. Once the city has you on their radar, it is hard to be done with them. The cherry on top of the entire situation though, there is a knock on the door in early November, same year. One of the Picard kids handed my sister an envelope and just walked away. We give it to my mom and inside there is a note saying something like, "This is for the shoveling you did already." There was a $100 bill inside. My family tried to return it, but they never answered the door. So we used it to take our large family out to our favorite buffet later that week. Thank you Picards for paying for a free service, we spent it well. The next one is titled Neighbors Read Their Contract. This is a story from a year ago involving my neighbors and I thought it was worth a share. My neighbors were selling their house and had been screwed left and right by buyers. For background, neighbor learned he was being relocated to another city, partner and him started working out the details and their house went on the market and was quickly closed with a deal pending. If you have never bought a house before, closing can take between 45 and 60 days with things like inspections, necessary repairs, etc., so they started down that process. Their buyers came off sweet but quickly turned sour. The people they hired to inspect my neighbor's house were family members and they came away with a huge sheet of things to be repaired or to knock down the price. Many of those repairs they demanded be fixed at my neighbor's expense by a different contractor, despite the fact that my neighbor is a contractor himself. Then they started sending people to the house unannounced, totally illegal, and showing up to the property on their own, trespassing. The nail in the coffin was that my neighbors had been strung along for a full 10 days longer than they should have been because the buyers kept threatening to back out of the sale, despite having already signed paperwork without their knowledge. All very muddy. As part of the contract, the buyers said that they needed to take all personal property and all debris, claiming a financial penalty for cleanup if there was anything on the property that the buyers thought counted. So my neighbors had spent a lot of time cleaning out yard debris, multiple dump runs, etc. But as the purchase was almost finalized and all this bad stuff was happening, they had an idea. While one is a contractor, the other one works in legal and has for 10 years. She took to the contract and local home purchase regulations for the definitions of personal property. Turns out that besides the obvious, light bulbs also count. They went through and removed every light bulb they could find, except ones that were installed as part of fixtures. The sellers had to purchase nearly $200 worth of light bulbs as part of their move-in, which they did not discover until they showed up with moving trucks. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.